She was a successful black architect driving her luxury sedan when a sneering cop pulled her over, convinced her expensive car had to be stolen. He mocked her, disbelieved her ownership, enjoyed her distress. He had no idea the impeccably dressed, articulate woman he was humiliating was not just any citizen, but the beloved, influential wife of his own police chief. His smug assumption was about to crash headfirst into a reality that would rock his career and the entire department. Welcome back, everyone, to a story that unpeels the layers of bias in the most unexpected places. Today, we explore a confrontation born from prejudice, where a badge became a tool for mockery, only to have the tables turned dramatically. If narratives that challenge assumptions and champion truth resonate with you, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. Your engagement helps us amplify these essential stories. We're grateful you're here for this journey into arrogance, identity, and the explosive power of a mistaken assumption. Eleanor Vance possessed an aura of quiet command, a symphony of intellect and elegance that defined her presence. At 45, she stood at the zenith of her career as a principal architect and partner at Vance & Sterling Design, one of Northwood's most prestigious and forward-thinking firms. Her signature was not ostentation, but innovation, sustainable, human-centric buildings that seamlessly blended form and function, earning accolades and reshaping the city's architectural identity. Her days were a meticulously orchestrated ballet of high-stakes client presentations, intricate blueprint analyses, intense collaborations with engineering teams, and demanding site inspections where her keen eye missed nothing. Eleanor was also a black woman, a reality that, despite her considerable achievements and the ostensibly progressive nature of her field, often subjected her to an undercurrent of unwarranted scrutiny, a subtle questioning of her authority or belonging that her white male counterparts seldom, if ever, faced. She had long ago cultivated a shield of unshakable professionalism, a calm, articulate dignity that served as her most effective defense against the insidious barbs of prejudice. It was a wearying necessity, but one she wielded with an almost regal grace. On this particular crisp autumn afternoon, Eleanor was navigating the city streets in her Tesla Model S Plaid, a recent acquisition. The car, a marvel of obsidian black engineering, was less a status symbol and more an embodiment of her appreciation for cutting-edge technology, sustainable innovation, and superlative design, principles that mirrored her own architectural philosophy. She was en route to a pivotal meeting with a reclusive tech magnate, a potential client whose ambitious vision for a sprawling, eco-conscious corporate campus could become the crowning achievement of her career. Her mind was a whirlwind of complex structural dynamics, zoning regulations, and aesthetic considerations. Dressed in a flawlessly tailored charcoal gray pantsuit, a silk blouse the color of soft pearls, and understated diamond stud earrings, she exuded an air of focused competence. Her leather portfolio, filled with preliminary sketches and feasibility studies, rested on the passenger seat, a testament to hours of meticulous preparation. Her hidden power, a concept she would likely have dismissed with a wry smile, was multifaceted. Primarily, it was her own formidable intellect, her impeccable professional standing, her articulate and unflappable nature that could disarm hostility and command respect. But there was another, more societally potent dimension. Her husband of 2 decades, Marcus Vance. Marcus had recently been appointed chief of police for the city of Northwood, a sprawling metropolis grappling with issues of crime, inequality, and a fractured relationship between its police force and many of its communities. He was a reformer, a man of deep integrity and quiet resolve, hand-picked by a city council desperate for change after years of scandal and mismanagement under the previous administration. Marcus was tasked with the Herculean challenge of rebuilding trust, rooting out corruption and ingrained biases within the department, and fostering a culture of accountability. Eleanor was his staunchest supporter, his confidant, his partner in a shared vision of a more just and equitable city. She rarely, if ever, leveraged his position for her own benefit, fiercely proud of her independently achieved success. Today, however, that unspoken connection was about to become an unexpected and entirely necessary shield. The city of Northwood was a study in contrasts. Gleaming skyscrapers casting long shadows over struggling neighborhoods, leafy suburbs abutting areas scarred by neglect. Its police department was similarly fragmented. While many officers were dedicated public servants, a deeply entrenched old guard resisted Chief Vance's reformist agenda, viewing his calls for community policing and de-escalation as coddling criminals and an erosion of traditional law enforcement authority. These were officers who often operated with a sense of entitlement, their actions shielded by a culture of silence and a reluctance from previous administrations to address misconduct. Patrolman Dave Miller was a product of this old guard, a 10-year veteran whose initial idealism had long ago curdled into a corrosive cynicism. He patrolled his beat with a perpetual chip on his shoulder, his worldview starkly divided into us, the police, and them, everyone else, particularly those who didn't fit his narrow, prejudiced mold. He had a particular disdain for what he perceived as elites and an almost visceral reaction to seeing minorities in possession of anything he deemed too expensive for them. These encounters often served as an opportunity for Miller to assert his dominance, to remind people of his power, a petty thrill in an otherwise unremarkable career. Chief Vance's emphasis on bias-free policing and respectful interaction was, in Miller's view, an attack on his very way of doing things. Eleanor was taking a familiar shortcut through the West Side District, an area undergoing a slow, complex process of gentrification, where dilapidated storefronts stood alongside trendy new cafes. When the telltale blue and red lights of a police cruiser flashed aggressively in her rearview mirror. The cruiser had appeared as if from nowhere, accelerating with an almost predatory urgency to close the scant distance between them. Eleanor's brow furrowed. She instinctively checked her speedometer, precisely the posted limit. She replayed her last few maneuvers in her mind. Clear signals, smooth lane changes, no infractions she could identify. Yet the cruiser clung to her bumper, its presence an unwelcome, accusatory weight. With a sigh of carefully controlled frustration, this was a delay she absolutely could not afford. She signaled, pulled her Tesla smoothly to the curb, and powered down the engine. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with an unspoken tension. Officer Miller was about to make a routine traffic stop, anything but routine, unaware that the sophisticated, articulate woman he was about to harass was inextricably linked to the one man in Northwood capable of derailing his entire career with a single, decisive command. The stage was set for a collision of arrogance and consequence. Officer Dave Miller approached Eleanor Vance's Tesla with a swagger that bordered on a strut, his posture radiating a preemptive antagonism. He took his time, deliberately prolonging the moment, letting her wait. His hand, as was his habit, rested near the butt of his holstered Glock, a subtle but constant reminder of his authority. He peered into the driver's side window, his eyes cold and appraising, doing a slow, insolent crawl over the car's sleek lines before settling on Eleanor. A smirk, more a sneer than a smile, tugged at the corner of his lips. The expensive vehicle, the black woman behind the wheel, his internal calculus of prejudice had already delivered its verdict. Suspicious, out of place, almost certainly up to no good. "Well now, isn't this interesting?" Miller drawled as Eleanor, with a quiet sigh, lowered her window. The manufactured folksiness of his tone was a thin veneer over a thick layer of condescension. "This is quite a chariot for this particular neck of the woods. Wouldn't you agree?" Eleanor's gaze was direct, her expression composed, though a flicker of annoyance crossed her features. She knew this script. "Good afternoon, officer," she responded, her voice modulated professional. "Is there a particular reason you've pulled me over?" "Oh, I think there might be," Miller said, his smirk widening. He leaned down, ostensibly to get a better look at her, but the movement felt invasive. "Let's start with your license and registration. And while you're at it, some proof that this Batmobile actually belongs to you wouldn't go astray." The insult, coupled with the blatant insinuation, was galling. Eleanor felt the familiar heat of indignation rise, but she pushed it down, her years of navigating subtle and not-so-subtle racism in professional settings kicking in. "Certainly, officer," she said, her voice crisp. She retrieved the requested documents from the glove compartment, her movements economical and precise. "The vehicle is registered in my name, Eleanor Hayes Vance. I am the sole owner." She presented the documents through the open window. Miller took them with a theatrical slowness, his eyes barely flicking over her driver's license before he fixated on the vehicle registration. He pursed his lips, feigning deep concentration. "Eleanor Hayes Vance," he mused aloud, as if the name itself were suspicious. "And you're claiming ownership of this high-tech marvel?" He gestured dismissively at the dashboard. "These things don't come cheap, Mind telling me what a lady like yourself does to afford such a conspicuous mode of transport?" The question was a clear overreach, a deliberate attempt to belittle and intimidate. Eleanor's composure remained intact, but her eyes narrowed fractionally. "Officer, with all due respect, my occupation is not pertinent to this traffic stop, assuming, of course, there was a legitimate violation that precipitated it. I would appreciate it if you would inform me of the reason I was detained." "Getting a little touchy, are we, Eleanor?" Miller chuckled, a grating, unpleasant sound. He clearly relished her discomfort. "I pulled you over because this vehicle, a black luxury sedan, matches the bolo. Be on the lookout for a car reported stolen from a dealership in the North End not an hour ago. Gaudouin, black, fancy, driven by a... Well, let's just say the preliminary description of the suspect has similarities." He leaned in again, his voice dropping to a stage whisper. "You wouldn't have taken a wrong turn out of the North End, now would you, Eleanor?" Eleanor stared at him, momentarily speechless at the sheer audacity, the blatant fabrication. He was inventing a stolen car report, tailoring it to fit her and her vehicle, right before her eyes. "Officer," she said, her voice now laced with an icy disdain, "that is a patently false accusation. This vehicle is mine, purchased legally from the Tesla dealership in Midtown. I am an architect, a partner at the firm Vance & Sterling Design, and I was on my way to a critical client meeting. I demand that you run my license plates and verify my information immediately. You will find that your bolo is either a mistake or a deliberate falsehood." The mention of Vance & Sterling, one of the city's most high-profile architectural firms, a name frequently in the business pages, seemed to give Miller a moment's pause. A flicker of something, uncertainty, crossed his face, but it was quickly extinguished, replaced by an even more determined arrogance. He wouldn't be outmaneuvered by her fancy title. "An architect, eh? Well, la-di-da." He tapped the documents against his palm. "Still, procedures are procedures. To ensure everything is above board, Eleanor, I'm going to have to ask you to step out of the vehicle. We can have a little chat on the sidewalk, clear up any confusion." "Step out of my car," Eleanor repeated, her voice rising slightly despite her efforts to control it. "On what grounds, officer? You have my documents. You can verify everything from your patrol car. I have a time-sensitive professional engagement that you are currently jeopardizing." "Now, don't you get your Porsches in a twist," Miller said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Standard procedure. We need to make sure you're not hiding anything. Weapons, contraband, you know the drill. Unless, of course, you are hiding something?" He loomed closer, his presence filling her window. "It's funny, isn't it? The ones who squawk the loudest are usually the ones with the most to conceal. You'd be amazed what we find in these fancy cars." The blatant disrespect, the undisguised contempt, the sheer enjoyment he was taking in this charade was infuriating. Eleanor knew he was baiting her, trying to provoke a reaction that would give him an excuse to escalate further. She took a slow, deliberate breath, centering herself. "Officer Miller," she stated, her voice now dangerously calm, each word carefully enunciated. "I will state this one more time. I am not exiting my vehicle unless you are placing me under arrest and can articulate the specific lawful charge. Are you arresting me, officer?" Miller's eyes, small and hard, narrowed into slits. He was clearly unaccustomed to such direct, articulate defiance, especially from someone he had already mentally categorized and dismissed. Her refusal to be cowed, her unwavering composure, seemed to fuel his resentment. "I could," he hissed, his hand drifting pointedly towards his sidearm. "I could arrest you for impeding an investigation into a felony auto theft, obstruction of justice. How would that play out for a high-flying architect like yourself? A night in the county lockup, mingling with the real criminals, might be illuminating." The threat was vile, a clear abuse of his authority. Eleanor knew she was dealing with someone not just prejudiced, but potentially unstable, a man intoxicated by the power of his badge. She glanced at her dashboard clock. Precious minutes were ticking away. Her client would be waiting, but this was no longer just about a meeting. This was about a fundamental principle. "Officer," she said, her voice regaining its cool, professional edge, "I strongly advise you to return to your vehicle, run my license and plates as you are required to do, and then, assuming you find no legitimate cause for further detention, to allow me to proceed on my way. If you continue this unlawful harassment, be assured, I will not only file a formal detailed complaint with the Office of Professional Standards, but I will also be consulting my legal counsel regarding a civil action for false imprisonment and violation of my constitutional rights." Miller actually laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Oh, a lawsuit now, is it? I'm quaking. Every Tom, Dick, and Eleanor who gets their feathers ruffled threatens a lawsuit. It's the new national pastime." He seemed utterly convinced of his own impunity. "Fine, I'll run your precious plates, but don't you dare move an inch. This isn't over, not by a long shot." He gave her one last contemptuous glare, then turned and swaggered back to his cruiser, a caricature of petty authority. Eleanor watched him go, her jaw clenched. This was more than an inconvenience. It was a deliberate, malicious abuse of power. She quickly retrieved her smartphone from her purse, her fingers deftly activating the voice recording app. She placed it discreetly on the passenger seat, ensuring the microphone was angled towards the driver's side. If Officer Miller intended to continue this performance, she would ensure there was an indelible record. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a cold, simmering anger and a resolute determination to see this through. This officer was a disgrace to his uniform, a living embodiment of the very problems her husband, Marcus, was fighting so hard to eradicate. The wait felt interminable. Eleanor watched Officer Miller in his cruiser, talking on his radio, occasionally glancing back at her, a smug look still plastered on his face. He was clearly drawing out the process, milking the situation for every ounce of perceived power. The minutes bled into 10, then 15. Her client meeting was now officially in jeopardy. The stress was immense, yet she forced herself to remain outwardly calm, her mind cataloging every detail of Miller's behavior, every nuance of his unprofessional conduct. Finally, with an exaggerated sigh that was audible even from her car, Miller emerged and sauntered back. He leaned casually against her driver's side door, his posture a study in insolent nonchalance. He made a show of handing back her license and registration, as if bestowing a great favor. "Well, well, Eleanor," he began, his voice dripping with feigned disappointment. "It appears that, against all odds, your fantastical tale of owning this vehicle actually checks out. For the moment, anyway." He practically spat the words. "Plates are clean, registered to you, no active warrants under your name. Imagine my surprise." His sarcasm was a blunt instrument. "Then I am free to leave?" Eleanor inquired, her voice devoid of inflection, her patience stretched to its absolute limit. "Not so fast there, Speedy," Miller retorted, a sly, unpleasant grin spreading across his face. He was clearly not ready to relinquish his perceived control. "While the paperwork on the car might be in order, I still have some lingering concerns. You got awfully defensive back there, agitated. In my experience, Eleanor, innocent folks with nothing to hide don't usually get their feathers quite so ruffled." His eyes roamed over the interior of her car again, lingering on her leather portfolio and a slim briefcase on the back seat. "What's in the fancy art folder and that attaché case? You wouldn't mind if I took a quick peek, would you? Just to be thorough, tie up all the loose ends." This was the very definition of a fishing expedition, a blatant and unlawful attempt to escalate the harassment. Eleanor's control, so carefully maintained, was beginning to fray. "Officer Miller," she stated, her voice now resonating with a dangerous, steely calm, "you have absolutely no legal basis, no probable cause whatsoever to search my vehicle or my personal belongings. You have confirmed my identity. You have confirmed the legitimate ownership of this car. This unwarranted detention and continued harassment must cease immediately. If you attempt to search my property without a warrant or my explicit consent, which I do not give, or if you detain me 1 second longer without lawful cause, I will consider it an act of false imprisonment, and I will pursue all available legal remedies." Miller's grin widened into a predatory smirk. He seemed to relish her articulate fury, her knowledge of her rights. It was as if her intelligence, her refusal to be a passive victim, only further fueled his desire to dominate and humiliate her. My, such big words from such a spirited lady. False imprisonment. Constitutional rights. "You've been watching a lot of TV, haven't you, Eleanor?" He leaned in, his face far too close for comfort, his breath smelling faintly of stale coffee and something acrid. "Look, sweetheart," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, leering whisper, "why don't you just make this easy on both of us? Be a good little girl, let me have a quick look-see in your bags, satisfy my curiosity, and who knows, maybe I'll just forget to write up that report about your uncooperative attitude. We can all just call it a day, no harm, no foul." The use of sweetheart, the demeaning sexist familiarity, was the spark that ignited Eleanor's carefully banked anger into a full-fledged inferno. That, combined with the implied threat and the utter contempt he was showing for her rights, for the very badge he wore, was too much. "That is absolutely it," she declared, her voice no longer calm, but ringing with cold, hard fury. She snatched up her phone, the recording app still silently capturing every word. I am now, this instant, contacting the Office of Professional Standards to report your egregious misconduct. And then, Officer Miller, I am making another call. Miller's eyes flickered with a momentary unease at the mention of professional standards, the department's internal affairs division, but his arrogance quickly reasserted itself. Go right ahead, he scoffed. And who's this other important call going to, Eleanor? The mayor, the governor, perhaps? He clearly believed her to be bluffing, a woman trying to use an empty threat to escape his control. Eleanor's fingers were already flying across the touchscreen, dialing a number she knew by heart. No, Officer Miller, she said, her gaze locking with his, a chilling, almost predatory glint in her own eyes now. Not the mayor. I am calling my husband. She paused, letting the words hang in the air for a beat. Police Chief Marcus Vance, and I have a distinct feeling, officer, that he will be extraordinarily interested in hearing a first-hand account of your thorough and professional police work this afternoon. The transformation that came over Officer Dave Miller was nothing short of spectacular. It was as if a puppeteer had suddenly, violently cut all his strings. The name Police Chief Marcus Vance, uttered with such calm, devastating certainty by the woman he had been systematically harassing, hit him with the force of a physical blow. The blood drained from his face, leaving it a ghastly mottled white. His arrogant smirk dissolved, replaced by an expression of slack-jawed, unadulterated terror. His eyes, which had been narrowed in smug contempt, widened in panic. He stared at Eleanor, truly seeing her for the first time, not as a target for his petty power plays, but as a figure of immense and now clearly imminent consequence. The expensive car, the tailored suit, her articulate fury, her unwavering composure, all these details which he had previously twisted into evidence of her suspiciousness, now reassembled themselves in his mind into a horrifyingly clear picture. He had just spent the better part of half an hour harassing, insulting, and unlawfully detaining the wife of his own police chief. Chief Vance? He stammered, his voice cracking, all traces of his earlier bravado evaporating like mist in a harsh sun. You're Mrs. Vance? Eleanor Vance, the chief's wife? Each word was a painful admission of his catastrophic misjudgment. Eleanor offered no verbal reply. She simply held his terrified gaze, her expression one of cold, righteous anger as her call connected. "Yes, good afternoon," she said into the phone, her voice a model of controlled composure, though an undercurrent of steely resolve was unmistakable. "This is Eleanor Vance. I apologize for the interruption, but I need to speak with Chief Vance immediately. It's a matter of some urgency regarding the conduct of one of his officers currently on duty." "Yes, that's correct. Officer Dave Miller, badge number 714. I am presently located at the intersection of Elm Street and Westworth Avenue. Yes, I will hold." She looked back at Miller, whose face was now slick with a sheen of cold sweat. Miller looked as though he might physically collapse. He took an involuntary stumbling step back from her car, his eyes darting wildly, like a cornered animal seeking an escape route that no longer existed. The entire universe, which moments before had seemed to revolve around his inflated sense of authority, had just imploded. He had wielded his badge like a club, and now it felt like a lead weight dragging him down into an abyss of his own making. He had gone from being the intimidating enforcer of his own prejudiced whims to the subject of a career-annihilating complaint, delivered directly and damningly by the one woman in the city whose word against his would be irrefutable. "Ma'am, Mrs. Vance, I am so profoundly sorry," Miller managed to choke out, his voice trembling. a pathetic parody of his earlier arrogance. "There has been a terrible, a grievous misunderstanding. I had no idea. I was just attempting to perform my duties. I clearly misread the situation." His attempts at backpedaling, at minimizing his egregious behavior, sounded hollow and desperate, even to his own ears. "Your duties, Officer Miller," Eleanor stated, her voice like chips of ice, her eyes still locked on his with an unwavering intensity, "do not include the harassment and humiliation of law-abiding citizens based on your personal biases and baseless suspicions. Your duties are to uphold the law with integrity and respect, not to abuse your authority for your own petty amusement or to intimidate those you deem out of place." The chief's personal aide came back on the line in Eleanor's ear. "Mrs. Vance, I'm so sorry for the delay. Chief Vance was in a critical command staff meeting, but I've explained the nature of your call. He's on his direct line for you now." "Marcus," Eleanor said, her tone shifting subtly, losing some of its icy formality but none of its underlying firmness. "It's Eleanor. I apologize for interrupting, darling, but I've had a rather extraordinarily unpleasant and unprofessional encounter with one of your officers, Officer Dave Miller, badge 714. He initiated an unwarranted traffic stop, baselessly accused me of driving a stolen vehicle, and despite verifying my license and registration, proving legitimate ownership, has continued to detain and harass me for the better part of 25 minutes. He even threatened to search my car without cause, and his remarks have been both demeaning and entirely inappropriate." She listened for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, he is standing right here." She extended her phone towards the visibly trembling Officer Miller. "The chief would like to have a word with you, officer." Miller looked at the proffered smartphone as if it were a live grenade. His hand, slick with sweat, shook uncontrollably as he reached for it. Sir, Chief Vance, sir, this is Officer Miller." "Yes, sir, No, sir, absolutely not, sir. I understand, sir. My most profound and sincere apologies, sir. And to Mrs. Vance, of course." Yes, sir, I will comply immediately." His face was ashen, his eyes wide with a terror that was almost pitiful to behold. He listened for another long, agonizing minute, his body locked in a rictus of dread, nodding jerkily in response to the unheard commands from the other end of the line. Every "yes, sir" was a nail in the coffin of his career. When he finally, shakily, handed the phone back to Eleanor, he looked like a man who had stared into the face of his own professional doom. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice barely a whisper, his gaze fixed somewhere on the pavement, unable to meet hers. "Chief Vance has instructed me to offer you my most sincere, unconditional, and abject apology for my egregious misconduct and catastrophic lapse in professional judgment. He has also instructed me to inform you that you are, of course, entirely free to proceed, and that he will be addressing this matter with me personally and immediately upon his return to the precinct. He specifically asked me to ensure that you arrive at your important meeting safely and without any further delay or inconvenience." He looked utterly defeated. All the fight, all the arrogance, completely drained out of him, leaving behind an empty, trembling shell. Eleanor accepted her phone, her expression composed but unyielding. "Thank you, officer. I will convey to the chief that you have relayed his message, and I trust, as I know him to be a man of unwavering integrity, that he will indeed address this matter with the seriousness it warrants." She did not offer him any false comfort, no pretense of forgiveness. She simply powered her window up, the smooth, silent whir of the electric motor, a final dismissive punctuation mark to the encounter, she engaged the Tesla's drive and with a quiet hum pulled away from the curb, leaving Officer Dave Miller standing alone on the sidewalk, looking small, insignificant, and profoundly, irrevocably shaken. As Eleanor drove away, her hands steady on the wheel despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, she allowed herself a single shaky exhalation. The anger was still there, a cold, hard knot in her stomach, but it was now overlaid with a grim sense of vindication. Officer Miller, in his blind arrogance and festering prejudice, had catastrophically misjudged. He had failed to see the accomplished woman before him, failed to recognize the quiet strength, the sharp intellect, and yes, the undeniable connection to the highest echelons of power within his own department, a connection he had so blithely and contemptuously dismissed. He had sought to humiliate her, to assert his dominance, to diminish her very being. Instead, he had orchestrated his own spectacular and public humiliation, the hidden power of her identity as Eleanor Vance, wife of the police chief, an identity she almost never invoked in her daily life, had been unleashed, not as a tool of unearned privilege, but as a necessary and potent shield against a blatant, intolerable abuse of authority. The shockwaves from this single, ill-conceived traffic stop, she knew with absolute certainty, would ripple through the entire Northwood Police Department, a stark and salutary reminder that prejudice wears many guises and that accountability sometimes arrives in the most unexpected and high performance of vehicles. The immediate aftermath of Eleanor Vance's harrowing roadside confrontation with Officer Dave Miller was characterized by the swift, decisive, and utterly uncompromising actions of Police Chief Marcus Vance. By the time Eleanor, remarkably composed, had concluded her now significantly delayed client meeting, where her tale of the encounter, shared with a wry apology for her tardiness, ironically solidified the tech magnate's impression of her as a woman of extraordinary grace under pressure. Officer Miller had been summarily summoned back to the Northwood Police Headquarters. He was met not with collegial concern, but with the cold, unyielding reality of his career imploding. Relieved of his patrol duties, his badge, and his service weapon, he was ushered into the chief's office to await a personal debriefing that promised to be anything but routine. That debriefing, according to departmental whispers that quickly permeated the precinct, was less a discussion and more a surgical dismantling of Miller's conduct, delivered with Chief Vance's characteristic calm but nonetheless devastating precision. The chief was armed with Eleanor's detailed, articulate account, the damning audio recording of the latter part of the traffic stop, which captured Miller's escalating harassment and his eventual, panicked unraveling, and Miller's own initial, vaguely worded dispatch logs that already hinted at a deviation from standard procedure. Miller's fumbling attempts to justify his actions, to paint himself as a diligent officer conducting a thorough investigation into a suspicious vehicle, withered under the chief's sharp, incisive questioning and the irrefutable evidence of his blatant profiling and abuse of authority. Miller's history, including previously misplaced or unsubstantiated citizen complaints alleging similar biased behavior, was exhumed and laid bare. The pattern was undeniable. The formal internal affairs investigation, launched immediately at Chief Vance's directive, was swift and conclusive. It was abundantly clear that Officer Miller had violated a litany of departmental policies, ranging from biased policing and abuse of authority to unlawful detention, unprofessional conduct, and potentially official oppression. The recommendation from IA was unequivocal: termination of employment.